morning. This may be a relatively brief video, but I think utilising this, YouTube and the webcam technology is good, and we can talk in a sense even over long distances face to face, either by webcam directly or by messages such as this. I've decided to put together a brief few short videos and a message to my various friends, particularly overseas in Britain, such as John and Nick, and of course Rob over there in Vancouver as well, and the new friends and contacts such as Mark in Chicago. I'll just send you a brief talk about my interests, as it were, and hobbies and railway life. And over time I hope some of you guys can actually make a reply, in other words, by your webcam as well. It's just going to become something of a new form of communication for all of us. Well, very briefly, I got interested in railways when I joined the Victorian Railways in 1967. I was not a rail enthusiast, but over a period of a short time, matter of months, I was loaned one magazine called Railway Transportation, which was very well known, very well respected at that time. In fact, I got volumes, or at least one or two volumes of it from a friend, and was just captivated by railways and everything that surrounds it. And then I was told that you could travel for free, or virtually for free, well, interstate, and you could certainly travel for quarter fare in Victoria, which I began to do. And in those days I had quite a selection of branch lines to travel on, and in fact I would say quite fairly over those early few years into my hobby and travelling on various rail tours and branch lines and so forth, and then interstate trips to Sydney and Adelaide and so forth. Some of my American friends were no doubt amazed or even jealous, I suppose, of what we had. We had some, to them and to many other people, would be regarded as absolutely ancient rolling stock at the time. Sleeping cars that were built in 1915 to 1920, still operating in the 70s and into the 80s. We had rail motor cars, or doodlebugs if you like, built as early as 1928 in Victoria, and still operating up until 1981. And many of those types of cars, and the Walker cars, which came from England and were constructed out here in Australia, actually the bodies and so forth, but they originated from the Walker rail car, or the Walker Rail Manufacturing Company near Manchester in England. And they were running until, as I said, literally 1981. But by the mid-70s, a lot of the branch lines, a lot of the mixed trains that were operating at the time, and the rail motor services were rapidly being replaced by buses. And anyway, I made my first overseas trip to the United States in 1974, followed by, and that was actually incidentally around the world by ship. It was quite interesting. I can elaborate, as I have done with a few friends, if anyone requests. Also, that was followed by, in 1976, 1977, and finally in 1980, to my last trip to the United States. And I have in recent years visited Britain a couple of times. In 2010 in August, where I met my friend Tom Reiser from Chicago, who I'd known and who I'd communicated with, incidentally, by we used to exchange cassette tapes in those days, and that was just the technology of the day. So we moved to the internet when that came in, of course. As I had other contacts in England which I've lost touch with now for a variety of reasons. I think a couple of them have actually died, as one of my friends in New Zealand has died. Um, and so that form of communication was never reached, in other words. But I met him, and I met my other friend John Zebedee in up near Birmingham. Actually, I flew into Birmingham, and incidentally, for overseas tourists who want to avoid paying the £100 plus departure tax from Britain, you don't have to do that. You can arrive and depart by train or by ferry. In other words, you can come in via Paris or you can come in via Dublin. It's very exciting, very interesting, and an alternative. You can fly into Dublin, and from the United States, my friend knows, Chicago friends can be aware, if they're not already, that there is a flight, I think it's daily, from Chicago to Dublin, and vice versa, of course. And rather uniquely, it's the only place in Europe where US customs and immigration is actually passed through and processed, in other words, at the Dublin International Airport, which is a fairly quiet and small facility compared to many others, and that's good because you can be more relaxed and not as harassed and you know, feeling lost almost, as you would in places such as Heathrow in London, which are excessively busy and crowded and troubled, let's say. So that's one of the things you can do, and then you can take a ferry to Fishguard in England, or Wales really, I think it is. So then you can use a Britrail pass, typically an 8-day pass or a 15-day pass or whatever might suit you, and then leave the country by train to Paris and then fly back to your country, or, as I said, via Dublin. It's something worth considering. So my various interests there include any passenger trains. As the old poem said, there isn't a train I wouldn't ride, no matter where it's going. And I have travelled on quite a number of lines that are now closed, and quite a number in Britain, not so much in Britain, but in the United States that are now history. Quite a number of trains that are now gone and been gone since, in particular, 1979, when Jimmy Carter cut back. Quite a number of services got the chop, as some of my American friends would know. More than know, they'd be have been most upset at the time, or disappointed with that kind of action. But I did ride trains such as the Inter-American, which was the first Amtrak train I ever travelled on in 1974, and I rode on the North Coast Hiawatha and the Floridian, and also rode quite a number of trains over there, including the Southern Crescent and the Rio Grande Zephyr, which were privately operated. The only ones of really great note that I missed out on were the Rock Island, which I was disappointed to have to say, but I guess you can't do everything. And I did ride the Georgia Railroad mixed train from Atlanta to Augusta, which was a classic, and I really should have stayed in Atlanta, or should have stayed in that Georgia area for a week and travelled on the other branch lines, but who's to know? It's one of those things that happens when you're travelling around, and I could say the same thing about Australia. Quite a number of lines I did, but quite a number I didn't. So as I say, then we returned also, my wife and daughter and I returned to Britain in July, August of 2011. So I do hope to get overseas again, perhaps to the centenary of Gallipoli landings in Turkey, as my grandfather planted the first Australian flag on the beach at Gallipoli. So it'd be worthwhile going to the centenary of that, and we just hope and pray, let's say, that we're able to afford to do it and able to make it. So that may well be the next time I get over to that region, or perhaps get back to the United States. I just don't know, but that's just a plan and just a thought. So anyway, I just leave those thoughts and ideas and things with you. And I've got lots of ideas as a railway enthusiast, of course, which I um, won't discuss now. And I should just say in passing that I have been a transport lobbyist over many years, with my first of all with my trade union in Sydney, and we got quite a few changes introduced in New South Wales, and also through the group Action for Public Transport. So I've been involved in that type of work on and off, or actually for all those years since the early 1980s. Anyway, that's quite long enough to talk to you at this time, and I do hope to get some of you to reply in a similar fashion. So I'd just like to say thank you for viewing and all the best. Bye now.